August 20th, 1944, somewhere over the South China Sea. The night sky burned with the cold light of distant stars, and the roar of four massive Wright R-3350 engines filled the darkened fuselage of the B-29 ramp tramp. Inside, the crew of 11 men sat strapped into their positions, sweat mixing with the smell of oil, metal, and nerves. Captain Harold Howe McAllister, 27 years old and a veteran of 20 missions, squinted at the glowing instruments in front of him. Altitude, 28,000 feet. Airspeed, steady. Fuel, running thin. Ahead lay their final leg, from Chengdu, China, to bomb the Yawata steelworks on the Japanese home islands. But tonight, the weather was turning ugly. "Radar's picking up storm cells all along the coast," called out Lieutenant Frank Delaney, the navigator. "If we divert west, we'll run low on fuel before we even reach target range." Hal rubbed his eyes beneath his oxygen mask. "We stay on course. The Japanese won't wait for sunshine." The Superfortress sliced through the clouds like a silver leviathan. At 99 feet long and with a wingspan greater than most city blocks, it was the most advanced bomber the world had ever seen, and the men aboard her knew it. In the rear compartment, Sergeant Tom Givens monitored the new remote-controlled gun turrets. His hands rested on a pair of control grips linked to the aircraft's central fire control system, and analog computers and periscopic sights that allowed him to target fighters without ever leaving his seat. It was like science fiction come to life. "Man, I still can't believe this thing flies. We've got electric guns, a pressurized cabin, and a bomb load big enough to level half of Tokyo." "You worry too much, Tommy," crackled the voice of co-pilot Joe Landers. "Just sit back and let Boeing and Uncle Sam do the heavy lifting." But outside, nature had other plans. The ramp tramp hit a sudden downdraft, a violent, invisible hammer that sent the 60-ton bomber plunging nearly 1,000 feet in seconds. Red warning lights flashed across the cockpit. "Engines 2 and 3 overheating," shouted the flight engineer. "Feather 3, feather it now." The propeller blades folded, slowing the drag. One engine dead, the other sputtering. The bomber's right wing dipped dangerously. In the dark chaos, the crew wrestled to keep her level. Lightning exploded across the horizon, an electric flash revealing the jagged mountains of southern China below. "Navigator, how far to base?" McAllister demanded. Delaney's voice came through, tight and uncertain. "We're off course, sir. Way off. Must have drifted during the storm. If I'm right, we're over Japanese territory." A long silence followed, only broken by the scream of the wind. McAllister glanced at the altimeter, 10,000 feet and dropping. He knew what that meant. They couldn't make it back to Chengdu, not with one dead engine and another coughing oil. "All crew, prepare for emergency landing," he barked. "Find a clearing, anything flat enough to put her down." The Superfortress descended through sheets of rain, its aluminum skin shuddering from turbulence. Beneath them stretched a patchwork of rivers and jungle. No lights, no towns, just darkness and enemy patrols. "God help us," muttered Delaney, gripping the edge of his chart table. Minutes later, the bomber's shadow swept over a flooded valley. McAllister pulled the throttles back, flaps down, landing gear locked. The ground rose to meet them, fast. "Brace! Brace! Brace!" The ramp tramp hit the rice paddies like a falling building. Metal screamed. One wing tore free. The nose crumpled into the mud. Engines tore through the soil, throwing geysers of water and fire. Silence followed. Only the hiss of rain and the faint crackle of burning fuel. Inside the wreckage, Captain McAllister stirred. His face was cut, his left arm broken, but he was alive. Around him, faint moans and static filled the intercom. "Everyone, sound off," he croaked. No answer from the rear gunners, no word from the tail. Only 3 voices replied, barely audible. He looked through the shattered cockpit window. In the distance, he saw torchlight flicker, moving fast. Japanese soldiers. He closed his eyes. The mission was over. But the real story, the one that would shock the Axis to its core, was only beginning.
Dawn crept slowly over the misty hills of Guangxi province. Smoke still curled from the broken fuselage of the B-29 ramp tramp, lying half submerged in the flooded rice paddies. Its aluminum skin, once gleaming in high-altitude sunlight, was now torn and blackened. Steam rose from twisted engines, and scattered among the reeds were fragments of something the Japanese soldiers had never seen before. Lieutenant Kenji Sato, a 32-year-old technical officer with the Imperial Japanese Air Service, arrived at the scene just after sunrise. His boots sank into the mud as he surveyed the wreck. Dozens of villagers had gathered nearby, whispering in awe. The size of the downed bomber dwarfed anything they'd ever witnessed. Sato adjusted his cap and approached cautiously. He knew American aircraft, B-17s, B-24s, but this was different, larger, sleeker. The metal was thinner yet stronger, rivets aligned perfectly. There was a strange, seamless quality to the build. "Is this some new type?" murmured Sergeant Nakamura beside him. Sato didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the cockpit, or what was left of it. The crew had already been taken by local troops to an intelligence outpost miles away. For now, his mission was the wreck. He motioned to his men. "Photograph everything, collect what you can carry, the rest will report to command." As they climbed into the torn fuselage, their lanterns flickered over rows of shattered instruments. Dials marked cabin pressure, levers for gun control remote, words in English but with a precision and purpose that unsettled Sato. One of the soldiers called out, "Sir, look at this." From the midsection of the bomber, they uncovered a large sphere of plexiglass, the remains of a sighting dome, connected to a complex tangle of wiring and servos. Sato knelt beside it. "This is for controlling the guns?" he asked aloud. "Remote turrets, maybe? But how could they—" "Not possible," Sato interrupted, shaking his head. "They've removed the gunners from their positions? No man in the turret itself?" It was unthinkable. Every Japanese and German aircraft placed men directly in the gun positions. Here, the turrets were unmanned, guided by electric motors from inside the plane. It was an alien concept to them, something only imagined in design papers. As Sato studied the shattered fire control system, he noticed another detail, an intricate network of conduits running through the fuselage walls. One section was torn open, revealing insulation and a layer of metal like any he had seen. He placed his hand against it. It was smooth, too smooth. "Pressurized," he whispered. "They flew higher than our interceptors can reach." By mid-morning, the site was swarming with engineers and intelligence officers. Word spread quickly. A new kind of American bomber had fallen from the heavens. Within 48 hours, Tokyo had sent orders, "Preserve the wreck at all costs." But the Japanese weren't the only ones who would see it. Weeks later, crates filled with salvaged parts, engines, control systems, pieces of fuselage, were loaded aboard transport ships bound for Singapore. From there, via German U-boats, they were sent westward to Europe. In Berlin, under the vaulted ceilings of the Luftwaffe Technical Bureau, the arrival of those strange American components caused a sensation. Engineers and officers gathered around the shipments like archaeologists unearthing a relic from the future. Oberst Wilhelm Rocky, one of the most top aviation engineers in Germany, examined the parts with a magnifying glass. He'd seen captured B-17s and B-24s, but this was something else. Larger, sleeker, and way better built than anything they had. He ran his fingers along the polished aluminum skin. "What alloy is this?" he muttered. "It's light, but stronger than duralumin. And look at this wiring, insulated against pressure changes. My God!" Another engineer, Dr. Hans Becher, unfolded a section of schematic recovered from the wreck. "This system, it controls the turrets automatically using gyroscopes. The Americans have achieved full centralized fire control." Radke straightened up, eyes wide. "Remote gunnery at 30,000 feet? That means fewer men, less weight, more range." He turned to his colleagues. "No wonder they can reach Japan. No wonder they can strike at will." For the first time, the Luftwaffe's finest minds felt something they hadn't in years: genuine disbelief. They had believed their technology, the Me-262 jet, the V-2 rocket, placed them ahead of the Allies. But this wreckage whispered a different truth. America's factories were building machines from another era. And deep in Radke's gut, He knew it. The war's outcome had already been decided.
Berlin, October 1944. In a dimly lit hangar on the outskirts of Tempelhof Airfield, a team of German engineers and Luftwaffe officers gathered around the long steel tables where the remains of the American bomber were laid out. Each piece was carefully numbered, cleaned, and catalogued, as though it were the body of some mythical creature dissected for study. The Japanese had sent only what they could salvage: a damaged turbo supercharger, sections of fuselage skin, fragments of the flight control system, and most intriguingly, the entire tail assembly, remarkably intact. Colonel Radke stood at the head of the table, a cigar burning forgotten between his fingers. His men were silent, eyes fixed on the glittering remains. "Gentlemen," he began, "you are looking at the most advanced aircraft on Earth." He nodded to a technician who powered up a small generator. Lights flickered, and one of the salvaged turret control modules hummed faintly to life. Tiny servos moved, responding to the motions of a joystick rigged to the system. The crowd murmured. "This," said Radke, "is their defensive brain. Each gun is linked to a central computer. No human sitting in the turret, no wasted air or armor. The machine thinks faster than a man. A single gunner can command multiple turrets." Another officer, Major Dieter Kruger, frowned. "But how do they maintain such power and coordination at altitude? Our planes freeze above 20,000 feet. Radke smiled grimly. "That's where the Americans have truly surpassed us." He gestured to a cutaway section of fuselage. "See this layer here? It's pressurized, hermetically sealed. They fly in shirt sleeves, while our men gasp in oxygen masks. Their entire cabin is a sealed vessel. It allows them to climb higher, farther, and for longer than anything we possess." He let the words sink in. "What you see here," he continued, "means they can attack from heights beyond our interceptors. Even our Me-109s and FW-190s can't climb fast enough. This is the future of strategic bombing." At the edge of the group, a young engineer named Kurt Eberlin flipped through sketches of the bomber's engines. "The turbo superchargers," he said softly. "They're not just boosting the intake, they're recycling exhaust gases to maintain power at altitude. It's engineering brilliance." Betcher nodded in agreement. "And look at the wiring harnesses. Every circuit is color-coded, standardized, the mark of industrial mass production. Not a prototype, not an experiment. They're building hundreds of these." A silence fell over the room. Even the hum of machinery seemed to fade. Radke exhaled slowly, watching the smoke curl upward. "If the Americans are fielding bombers like this now, what will they build in 2 years? 5? They've industrialized genius." Meanwhile, across the world, word of the wreckage's recovery spread through Japan's technical circles. In Tokyo, engineers at Nakajima and Mitsubishi pored over the same fragments. They studied the smooth welds and flawless rivet lines, the electrical systems far ahead of anything in their own factories. To them, the B-29 Superfortress seemed less like an aircraft and more like a declaration, a message, that the Americans were fighting not just with men, but with machines born from an industry no Axis power could hope to match. By late 1944, the Japanese had begun modifying their anti-aircraft tactics. They now knew what they were up against: bombers that could fly above 30,000 feet, strike with pinpoint accuracy, and survive hits that would have destroyed any other plane. Reports from the home islands soon confirmed it. Civilians in Nagoya, Osaka, and Tokyo described the new American bombers as ghosts in the sky, invisible until their bombs fell, unstoppable once they arrived. In Berlin, Radke received those same reports with grim fascination. "It's the same machine," he muttered, reading the decrypted intercepts. "The same monster we saw in pieces, and now it's over Japan, burning their cities to the ground." He looked at Betcher and said what many already feared. "The war has moved beyond us. We are watching the birth of a new age, one built not by ideology, but by industry." The wreckage of the Ramp-Tramp, one bomber among thousands, had done something no Allied strategist could have planned. It had shown Germany and Japan a glimpse of their own defeat. Because in every wire, every polished panel, and every ingenious mechanism, the Axis engineers saw a truth they could not deny. America's factories were not just making weapons, they were making the future. And that realization, more than any bomb, shattered the myth of Axis superiority forever. January 1945. Berlin was freezing.
The Luftwaffe's test airfield at Rechlin lay under a crust of snow, the skeletal remains of wrecked aircraft half buried in white. Inside one of the hangars, Colonel Wilhelm Radke stood beside a table covered in sketches, blueprints, and fragments from the American B-29 Superfortress. The German engineer had not slept in nearly 2 days. Outside, the city's air raid sirens wailed again. The Allies were coming, as they did every night now. Radke barely noticed. His eyes were locked on a drawing he'd made from the wreck's remains, the pressurized cabin design, annotated with notes in German. Do you realize this aircraft doesn't just fly, it transcends the limitations of men? They've built an ecosystem inside the sky. Kurt Eberlin, his young assistant, nodded. Sir, if we had factories like theirs, Radke cut him off with a tired wave. Factories. That's the point, isn't it? It's not one genius or one design. It's thousands of minds working as one. We are craftsmen, they're industrial gods. He walked over to a metal crate, opened it, and lifted out a small piece of curved glass, thick, clear, and impossibly light. It had been part of the B-29's nose blister, shattered in the crash, but still intact enough to study. Even their glass is engineered for altitude and pressure, he muttered. Ours cracks had a fraction of this. A moment later, Major Kruger entered the hangar, his coat soaked with snow. Herr Oberst, he began. Intelligence just confirmed it. The Americans are using these machines to bomb Tokyo directly from islands over 1,500 kilometers away. They're burning entire cities. The Japanese can't stop them. Radke didn't look up. Of course they can't. This is what we warned them about. He turned toward the scattered remains of the ramp tramp, still being examined months after its discovery. This bomber is their secret weapon, not because of its guns or its speed, but because it's the product of a system that can build 1,000 more just like it. Kruger hesitated. Then what do we tell High Command? Radke gave a bitter smile. Tell them the truth. The war was lost the moment America decided to build machines like this. Half a world away, in Tokyo, similar words were being whispered in military briefings. Japanese engineers, after months of studying the same wreckage, had realized that the Americans had mastered something the Axis never could: mass production at perfection. They had re-engineered the aircraft's turbo supercharger, discovering its use of exotic heat-resistant alloys, unavailable in Japan. They examined its centralized gunnery system only to find it depended on electric motors requiring copper and precision machinery beyond their reach. The result was humbling. A sobering acknowledgement that even if they understood the B-29 secrets, they could not replicate them. In one secret report sent to Tokyo's Imperial Air Staff, an engineer wrote simply, "Even if we could copy it, it would take 10 years to match its precision. America can build one every day." That single line circulated quietly among Japan's senior command. Some refused to believe it. Others, including the head of the Nakajima Aircraft Company, knew it was true. By March 1945, as American B-29s rained fire over Tokyo, Colonel Radke watched reports coming from the east. He read of 100,000 civilians dead in a single night, entire districts erased by napalm. The Superfortress, the same machine whose pieces he had held in his hands, was now rewriting the face of war. He turned to his assistant, voice low. "Do you see, Kurt? The bomber we studied was not a relic. It was a prophecy." Eberlin stared at the window, where faint orange light flickered from the distant skyline. Berlin, burning under Allied bombs. Radke continued, "They've brought the industrial age to its final expression. We made weapons to fight wars. They made a system to end them." A silence hung between them. Finally, the colonel looked once more at the fragment of polished aluminum on his desk, a curved, gleaming section of fuselage stamped with faint English letters, "Property of U.S. Army Air Forces." He placed it gently back into the crate and closed the lid. "This piece of metal," he said softly, "is the story of our defeat." Months later, after Germany's surrender, Allied investigators would find those same crates still sitting in the Rechlin hangar. Inside lay the remnants of the ramp tramp, the downed B-29 whose brief flight had bridged 2 worlds, one fading into ruin and one ascending into the future. What began as a crash in a storm over China ended as a revelation in Berlin. Proof that America's real power wasn't in any single weapon, but in its boundless capacity to invent, to build, and to imagine what came next. And for those who studied its wreckage, that truth hit harder than any bomb ever could.